people who consider Mission Gathering home who, for one reason or another, can't be here in person. So that way they can still participate. And so I will occasionally look at my phone just so that way if someone asks a question online, I can respond to that as well as be able to respond to your guys' questions as well. But yeah, oh yes, okay, fantastic. Could you actually click the very first one? That way it shows on the confidence monitor. You guys, I'm sure, have learned that I like my slides. It's like a pacifier to me, you know. So it just helps me feel comfortable as I'm doing all the things. And so I'm going to just kind of go through a lot of just the different things. So I'm calling this the church family business meeting because theologically the church is often spoken of as a family. And in the modern world, we very much have, particularly in the American, church, we have very much institutionalized church and made religion into a business in some ways. And so I recognize that there are business elements, but first and foremost, the church is a family. And so because of that, there are naturally, like with any family, there are bills to pay. There's rent, there's mouths to feed, different things like that. And so that's kind of what just the heart behind calling it church family business. Are we live yet?
Yes, we are.
Okay, we are.
Do you want one of us to hold your phone?
It's not showing up. No, you don't have to hold it.
Okay.
Although, yeah, I guess if one of you just wants to be attentive to the live stream and let me know if there's any questions. But yeah, so I want to kind of just begin with just a brief history of Mission Gathering, and then from there I want to get really into the finances from there, and ultimately just kind of throw out some different ideas that me and the board have kind of been talking about in order to make sure that Mission Gathering is much more sustainable and really living into our values as a progressive Christian church. And so just kind of a history, many of you guys know we were part of a denomination called the Disciples of Christ. It has been around for many, many years, and really the heart of it is this idea of the restoration movement of unity. And in the year 2000, the Disciples of Christ as a denomination had what they called Vision 2020. And what that was, they had several different goals in that Vision 2020, but one of the goals was to start, it was this pretty lofty vision, to start 1,000 new churches. That was in 2000. Mission Gathering started in 2003. Mission Gathering was one of said churches, sort of thing. In fact, not just one of said churches. There were at one point 5 Mission Gatherings there. So kind of we ended up being 5 of those churches. And so Mission Gathering San Diego started, followed by Mission Gathering Charlotte, followed by Mission Gathering Denver. I'm not sure if I'm totally getting the order right here of how it started, and then Mission Gathering Bellevue and Mission Gathering Pasadena. And many of these churches, so we ended up being 5 of those 1,000 essentially. And there was just lots of funding, there was lots of vibrancy, lots of life around that. Unfortunately, as many of us know, not just churches, but many institutions closed in 2020. And so 2 of the 5 did not make it through the pandemic. Mission Gathering Denver closed in 2020, as well as Mission Gathering Pasadena. And so today there are 3 different Mission Gathering Christian churches throughout the nation, really embodying this progressive Christian faith and just this modern expression of it. And I share that with you because 2 of these churches closed in 2020, and frankly, we were close to being one of said churches. There was a reality that we started in 2003, bought a building in 2008-ish. Yeah. Okay. So what I'm trying to get at is there was a mortgage over the head of the church, and so as we stopped gathering in person, there was difficulty paying said mortgage, and Mission Gathering very much could have potentially closed, and so there was a difficult decision that was made to sell the building, and as a result, we are still here. It was a very, very difficult decision, but ultimately it made Mission Gathering sustainable as an organization. And so I just want to kind of just make sure to kind of set up that history, because it's through that we have been financially sustainable as a small church. And so as we talk about the finances, this is a very important backstory to just kind of be aware of, that from that building, bought it in 2008-ish. Those of us who kind of know just the economic history of our country, 2008 was a very low point for just the finances of our nation. And so it was a bit of a lower price for buying, and then it rose. So I'll have to say, a decent amount of funding came out of selling that building. And so just to kind of give you guys the numbers, I'm going to be as transparent as possible. Feel free to kind of chime in at any point. But so from that funding, from selling our building in North Park, we received a little over $1.5 million in the bank. $517,932.56 was allowed to be used for operating expenditures. But then there was another portion of the money that we could only use for the purchase of a new building. It's $1,093,735.75. Very specific. But I'm not sure where those numbers came up with specifically. Yes?
Property.
What?
Property.
Yeah. So yes, property. Yes, thank you. For the purchase of property. And that $1,093,000, it's been sitting in a savings account. And so thankfully, just through just the reality of interest and all of that, since those funds, it has increased by $33,671. And so there's now $1.1 million, a little over that can be used for the purchase of property. And then the operating expenditures naturally has declined. Since we got those funds in December of 2022 was when we were first kind of given access to that, or 23? 22?
22.
December 2022. Okay. So in 2023 and from here, we have used about 164,000 of it. And so now this is kind of the financial state of what we have in our account as a church. And so I share this with all of you as we've kind of moved into this space. The heart of moving into this space was really when we started in North Park many years ago. We were one of a few progressive churches, yet East County San Diego tends to be more conservative. There's not as many, if any, progressive spaces of faith. And so we wanted to serve the community of San Diego well, and we said, hey, over the years, there have been more churches, more progressive, inclusive churches that have emerged in North Park, but not really any in East County. And so that was our heart in moving to La Mesa. And so as we've come here, naturally, a place like this and different things cost a certain amount of money. And so I'm going to list some numbers here. And just I want you all just to breathe for a second. Because these are San Diego numbers. All of us are aware how much rent is in San Diego. It is rough. And so when we talk about renting a commercial space, take whatever your rent is on a residential and typically more than that. So just wanted to brief you for that. And additionally, before I list these numbers, before you see these numbers, I want you to know, please know, I'm going to propose some changes that I believe will reduce these expenses and help us to mitigate some of these expenses that are currently there and make us more sustainable. So with that, you guys ready? All right, okay.
Deep breaths.
Deep breaths, yeah. Everyone, okay. Anyone want to guess how much the rent is in this space?
4,000.
5,000 a month.
Okay, so there's 4,000 square feet. You know the number.
I could be really good at guessing.
You could be real. Okay, go ahead, Sarah. What?
Well, now I'm afraid I'm going to be wrong. Is it like 75, 78? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So a year, it comes out to $92,000. Okay, all right. Musicians. As you guys have seen, we bring in musicians every single week. Those actually are paid musicians, and so collectively, over the course of a year, it comes out to about $23,000. And then lastly, and this is putting myself on the spot here, but I am a full-time employee here. I was part-time up until very recently, so April 15th was my first day as kind of the called long-term pastor here. And I'm gonna list just the overall pay of what I receive, and then I'll kind of list what that breaks down to in terms of salary and benefits. To some of you, this might seem like a lot. To some of you, might be like, that might seem like a little, but all depends on what background you come from. So overall, it's $70,000 a year. I receive a $57,000 salary, plus $12,000 in benefits, which includes insurance, transportation, continuing education. And so those are kind of the overall expenses there. And so I want to propose 3 things that I think will reduce all of these expenditures, and yes, I am talking about reducing my pay as well, and things that I think will bring in funds. And because if nothing changes, you guys could kind of do the math based on these numbers and the amount that we said we had for operating expenditures. If nothing changes, keyword, if nothing changes, we would be out of funds in 2 years. But
2+.
Two-ish, yes, sorry.
Yeah.
And so I want to kind of just propose some changes and show that how we can be much more sustainable, as well as I think just kind of live into our values as well. So starting with musicians. 23,400 is what has been spent in the past, but naturally, as we've kind of looked at these numbers and as we talked about music, anytime you say these numbers, a musician in the room speaks up. They're like, "What's like? I sing, right?" Like, so a lot of, if you look at just kind of the congregation, there are many of us who sing. There are many of us who play like piano. There are many of us who play guitar. There are musicians in our midst. And so essentially the conversation became, as we looked at this $23,000 number for one musician to come in kind of as a gig, we kind of just asked the question, well, what if we cultivated a volunteer worship culture? Because many of us here love mission gathering. If those of us who are musicians, we would love to give our gifts and participate and be a part of a vibrant worship culture. And so essentially that was kind of the main thing that we kind of started to. And so that's something that going forward we're really going to start living into, that many of us here are going to, and are you okay with me mentioning?
Of course.
Jeff? So Jeff is going to kind of spearhead that. Some of you guys might know this, but Jeff and Frank actually met in choir. So we have some singers in our midst, as well as other musicians in our midst. And so pretty much immediately for this year, we're going to cut out that $23,000 by just living into the volunteer worship culture. And so that's kind of going to be the main thing up front that we're just immediately doing. More of a long-term thing, so not immediately for my pay, but something to really just kind of look into. Some of you guys know this, some of you don't, but I was a bivocational pastor for many years. What that means is I worked multiple jobs sort of thing. Probably not bivocational, like trivocational sort of thing. For many times I've kind of worked different jobs to make ends meet. Even when I was a pastor in the megachurch world, I was also a high school teacher for several years there. I taught world religions, I taught ethics, I taught the Bible as literature, but unfortunately, school districts, private school, the anti-trans policies eventually became too much for me to want to continue teaching there. I got kind of labeled as the liberal teacher. It was a fun time. So eventually I kind of left that. And prior to teaching as well as after, I was a baker for many years. I did. So I was a baker in kind of different places. I worked at a coffee shop. I helped kind of make the donuts there and kind of cultivate and create the recipe, as well as that was like a graveyard shift, so that was fun. So, and then separate from that, I also worked at Crumble Cookies, if any of you guys have ever been there. Yeah. That was something that I did for a while. Hyper sugary cookies. And so essentially there was a time where my wife and I actually talked about like maybe me opening up my own bakery or working full-time at Costco or something like that. And basically, essentially being a full-time baker long-term and being a pastor as a volunteer, that was something that we entertained and sometimes still entertain. but I have scoliosis, pretty intense scoliosis. And so being over a counter for an extended period of time, lifting up 50-pound bags of flour for 8-hour shifts and stuff like that, I started to feel just really intense pain as I was working kind of the long hours as a baker. And so unfortunately, that was something where my scoliosis over time became too much. And I was like, this might not work either. So what I'm trying to get at is essentially, I've had this feeling for a while that, hey, I should be a bivocational pastor. I think that is the most sustainable for a church. I think that's kind of just very biblical in many ways. Like, you have Paul the apostle, his tent-making ministry and all that. And so essentially, I've had this feeling for a while that, hey, long-term, I don't want to be dependent upon a church for my income. I don't want the church to be, burdened by supporting me, sort of thing. But I've been kind of trying to figure out what that is. Just recently, I got a little bit of funding from our denomination, actually, to start a project I've been very passionate about for a while, that I'm hoping, it's going to be a side thing for a while, but I'm hoping it could potentially become my income where I could be volunteer. And so I've started this thing. It's essentially just going to, it's starting in a few months. It's essentially just going to be a progressive online Bible commentary. So really taking my academic knowledge and trying to make it public, because what I hear a lot from different people is, oh, you say things in your teachings that I've never heard before. And that's kind of just a common thing that I've heard, but in academic circles, I mean, this stuff is common knowledge, but it's very often not, it's very not often public. And so I'm gonna start creating essentially videos, and with that, devotionals and study guides. And my hope is over, however many years, that this could become something that sustains me and even sustains some of my friends who are, with me in seminary. And so with this, there's kind of this model that there are many pastors out there who have chosen to stop taking income from the church, but they continue to pastor the church when and if their side projects become fruitful. And so some more common, this is common with pastors of smaller churches as well, but some famous examples would be like Rick Warren, who wrote The Purpose-Driven Life. When that sold a lot of books, for the last 20 years of him being a pastor at Saddleback, he was a volunteer there, technically, he was making money from his books and stuff like that. And so if my online Bible commentary happens to be fruitful and do so, I would like to explore the idea for mission gathering for me to be either part-time or completely volunteer as a pastor, because if we can do that, then that $57,000 salary, the $70,000 overall, that is something that over time could just be crossed out, and that would radically save us as an institution. And like I said, I think just living into kind of a model of tent making and those sorts of things could be really, really cool. And especially, let's be honest, as progressive Christians, we're very skeptical of institutionalized religion to some extent. I imagine many of you guys had a visceral reaction to that number, and so my hope is that eventually we could show the numbers and there would be no visceral reactions, because it'd be like, oh, that's actually pretty cool. The pastor's a volunteer, musicians are basically no one's getting paid here, sort of thing. And I think that could be something that would be very compelling to people. And then lastly, the rent. Unfortunately, not a whole lot we can do about that, because
Until next night.
what? Yeah. So our lease is through April 30th, 2025. So perhaps, we can find something more affordable in May or something like that. But until then, we actually recently got permission to sublease, which is really, really awesome. This place used to be a real estate office. So all of these little awkward curtains here, where every time someone comes in for the first time, we're like, what's that? Those were cubicles. The children's ministry was the corner office. These were offices. These were all offices. And so there are 12 to 15 built-in offices into this space. We might not rent out every single one of them, but essentially the thought is, hey, if we've gotten permission to sublease, let's use that. And so we're going to look into renting out the built-in office spaces during typical office hours. So, during the day, during the week, so that way we can still have evenings for different studies, different groups, as well as the weekends for different events we might want to do. But, Monday through Friday, this space is unused during the day. And so to utilize that and to be able to reduce the expenses. And I'm not sure exactly how much that will come out to based on how much and so it won't fully X out, but we will at least be less than that $92,000 number to just be able to rent out and sublease this space. How's everyone doing? Okay, all right. So essentially just to summarize suggested changes, so shift toward a volunteer model of worship, to have me work toward being bivocational or volunteer, to sublease the office space, and that through all of that max it would be $165,000. If we can sublease, it'll be less than that. If I can start, relying more on my own nonprofit to provide more of my income, it could be less than that. And currently, our giving is about $45,000 a year, which I personally think is pretty amazing. There's this research from Barna Research Group. They're kind of like really big in the church world. And the average kind of across the board, kind of the general metric is that average giving tends to be about $1,000 per year per member of the congregation. So in other words, like $45,000 a year should be expected from a congregation that has an average of like 45 people attending on a Sunday. Which we actually have less than 45 people attending on a Sunday at the moment. And so I actually find this pretty amazing, and so I don't want to be like, oh, we need to get more or something like that, but to recognize at the same time that, just based on that math, about $120,000 a year will be pulled from that $350,000. And so just based on that math, these changes would give us a little over 3 years for the congregation to either grow or for me to go bivocational. And so based on, that metric, if we were to rely purely on giving, which, like I've said, I don't know if it is necessarily the route, but if we rely purely on giving based on that Barna metric, we would need to grow to 165 people in 3 years. Or if I was totally volunteer, that would reduce it by 70,000, and we'd really only need to grow to about 90 people in 3 years, which would be also very reasonable. So that is all I got. If you're kind of wondering what you can do in the midst of all of this, so I would just, if you love Mission Gathering and want to see other people find a community like Mission Gathering, you can invite people. There's also just lots of research of like, people will typically come if you invite them, sort of thing. And especially in just an urban hub like San Diego County, I mean, there's a lot of people who are looking for a church like Mission Gathering. So consider inviting someone. If you know anyone who might be looking for office space, or if you personally are looking for office space, let me know, let them know. Yeah?
What's like the average price of the rent on that office?
It'll depend on which one, because these ones are a little bigger than, these ones over here. But there's another church in Oceanside that's doing something very similar, Oceanside Sanctuary, and some of their smaller offices are like $300 a month, and some of their bigger ones are more like $400 or $500. So depending on the size of the office, yeah, like $300 to $500 a month, sort of thing for office rental.
And that includes utilities?
Yes, yeah, so that would include utilities, you'd have access to Wi-Fi. I mean, we haven't talked about this, but maybe some snacks as well, yeah. but yeah, so essentially to kind of have a space where someone could come in, have access, use it for their office space. Oh, sorry, I thought you were asking a question. Yeah, so essentially, so if you know anyone, let them know that hey, we kind of want to host that we're going to be hosting office space here. And then consider volunteering if it's something like, if you're a musician, like I said, then that's something you can bring your gifts to. But whatever it is, that if there's something you're passionate about and you'd like to participate, then that'd be amazing. And then lastly, just setting up a recurring giving plan. If that's something that you just love Mission Gathering and you want to give back to Mission Gathering, you can do that through that little QR code right there. That'll go to Tithely. Yeah, so I think that's all I got, guys. That's all I got. Are there any questions? Oh, you've got a mic? Look at you go.
I'm gonna come up after you.
Yeah, and if there's anyone watching online, you guys can feel free to type in the comments any questions as well, and I'll get to those. But yeah, I just want to know everyone's kind of thoughts and feelings and questions, comments, concerns, all the things.
Are you able to use the interest earned on the 500,000 to the interest on the million compounds?
Like,
So the question was, could you repeat it into the microphone, Bill?
I saw 2 pots of money,
Yes.
one about $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
I assume that we're able to keep the interest earned on that every year.
Yes. Yeah.
But the million, the interest on that is compounded and kept in
Mhm.
a separate bucket and will likely grow
Mm-hmm.
a property purchase.
Yeah. So it's already grown $33,000 since it was deposited in the account. To my knowledge, based on just looking at the contract, I believe we can still only use whatever interest for the property. It's not something where like, oh, that $33,000 we can now use for different expenditures. So just kind of across the board, anything that's in that account, including the interest accrued, can only be used for the purchase of a property. The exact language is, give me 1 second, I'm processing it. The exact language is that any funds withdrawn from the account can be used for the purchase of any real property benefiting Mission Gathering. So we have to wait for that. Any purchase of property. Yeah, Frank.
Is there plans to have someone focused on community engagement opportunities? For example, just a simple Google that I did yesterday of La Mesa City events comes, there's a weekly, every Friday afternoon farmer's market.
Mm-hmm. Oh, like could we have a
Exposure.
booth there or something
Yeah,
like
just
that?
to be there and let people know that we're actually
Mhm.
here. Right, and again,
Yeah.
find out what it is,
Yeah.
getting together with somebody else, if it's a vendor or
Mhm.
something that we can promote
Yeah.
jointly. On next Saturday, there's the La Mesa Flag Day Parade.
Mm-hmm.
We having a pride parade float, or
Yeah.
just to have something, just to be an exposure into
Mm-hmm.
community events that are already existing.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, there are some things that we already do, as we know, like the Pride Parade, that are kind of just natural in our rhythms. But yeah, we don't have a point person assigned to it yet, but I would love to start essentially kind of more like an outreach team, some people who feel comfortable just being present at those different events, whether it be a booth or just present with Mission Gathering shirts. Something we've talked about has been in the future doing like a door hanger campaign of just putting door hanger flyers out. There is this church in Murrieta that is been one of the fastest growing churches in the nation for about 5 or 6 years now, and one of their main things is they literally just go door to door, not like door to door evangelism, like, hey, do you have a moment to talk about, but they go door to door and literally just hang up door hangers. But then if someone's like, hey, what's this about? Like if they actually engage them in conversation, they just kind of know how to engage. So that's something that, yeah, so community events, outreach, just anyone who kind of feels comfortable talking, like super evangelistically, but just comfortable just letting people know. Like I said, I think that many people are craving something like a progressive Christian church, yet are unaware that it's really a thing. In fact, a few members of Mission Gathering have come and been like, I didn't know that something like this existed, So yeah, so it's on the radar. It's something that I want to do in the near future. But to answer your question, no, we don't have like a point person yet assigned, like they're going to be leading this.
Can I talk a little bit about that?
Of course you can.
So this last year, I mean, I want you guys to, I'm gonna sit next to you. Because I feel awkward. So I just want to point out that building a church is a lot of work. And so this last year, doing all of this, I mean, there was just a lot that we had to do. The AV system, building that, the electrics, all that stuff. I mean, there was just a ton of stuff that we did. And that's what we focused on this last year, was just making this space so that you could come and feel comfortable in worship. And I think that that was important. This next year is really about focusing, getting out into the community and letting our community know that, letting the community know we're here, because how do they know? I mean, they don't. We haven't, we haven't done any advertising or anything that much. And so we've, yesterday we had a board retreat, and a lot of things came out of that. We talked about, like, once a month we're going to start doing a cleanup. So we're going to pick an area in La Mesa, and we're going to go out and we're going to clean. And I think that that's going to be the key, is doing that. I love the postcards. We've done it in the past, and we had success with that when we were in North Park. But it's really about, for me, it's about engaging. We've talked about, various things, food pantry and so forth. So the board is actively having these conversations, which is exciting, because I really want the community to know what we have to offer. And, it's strange. I think I met a couple like 4 weeks ago, and they literally live up the hill over here. It was just like, wow. So anything that you can, tell us what you would like to see, I think that to me is something really important. I'm going off of my, 15 years of being at Mission Gathering and all the various things that we've done. I mean, we've done so much. And this is a different community. So I think it's just really important to get you guys involved and active, and tell us things that you want to do, but then also sign up for these things. And I do see that there's hope here. There's the budget, the numbers. I mean, they are what they are. But I think that once we start engaging in this community, we're going to start seeing our church grow. When I started Mission Gathering, I know we were probably about 90 people, and then at one point we were 2 services, and I mean, it was just, there was like 30, 40 volunteers and everything. So I think that that's where it's going to come into, is engaging our community, inviting your friends, or just letting your friends know, because I know it is a kind of awkward. I went to dinner, I think it was about a year ago, and was at dinner with all my friends, and I found out they were all atheists. And I was just like, what? But yet all these people do my homeless outreach. They're all there doing all these things with me. So that's what we always say with Mission Gathering, is come as you are. Wherever you are on your journey, you're welcome. So we have a lot to offer. So I'm very excited. I'm excited to have, Braden. Braden has, he thinks outside the box. I mean, we were all sitting there yesterday looking at him, like, the things that he comes up with. I also want to say a special thank you to Jeff. Yesterday we had our retreat, and Jeff put together this portfolio of things. I mean, you would have been like, wow. But that commitment that we get from you, Jeff, is that that's my drive. That's what I do. And the other thing is that we're really working on our mission. Mission Gathering has always had a mission, and before it was our homeless outreach. That's how Barry and I met. Barry was the bus driver. He used to go pick them up, and he would drop them off, and I would feed them, and then, and now we're switching over to the orphanage. We're still doing some homeless outreach, but the orphanage is our foundation, and we're coming up on our 2 years now, which is incredible for me. It's like we have been consistent in these kids' lives to the point where we're seeing them grow up now. It's like, wow. So I just want to invite you guys to be a part of this. To me, the tithing is a part of worship when it comes to your church. The volunteering is you're volunteering with your brothers and sisters in the church, and so I think it's really important to separate those two. I know that when I started out a long time ago, it was like, if I couldn't give $20 or more, I wasn't going to tithe. And then I realized that it's not about the amount, it's the act. It's the worship of that, and I think that that's what's really important. So if it's $2, it's $2, and that's it. But running a church is not cheap, unfortunately, and we would love to not pay that kind of rent, but for what we have here, it's good. I mean, we get to have these, and so you're going to see a lot more functions. You know, Braden's got a few new classes coming up that I'm excited to hear about. So we're going to see some growth this year. And by the way, we started out with 10 people when we opened the doors here, and we're, you know, on average, you know, 25 to 35 a week, and there's still some more in there that come. And people don't go to church every week, by the way. It just doesn't happen. So I'm excited. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that is an important point, because when I mentioned like that idea of like our church growing to X amount of people, that can be like, but yeah, like just even just within the past year, and that was when I was part-time and things were still kind of on the move. Yeah, we did grow from 10 people to like 25 to 30, and so we doubled in size, sort of thing. And so yeah, the idea of in 3 years growing even more, I think is pretty reasonable and realistic. And so yeah, and especially as we reduce expenses in various capacities, it'll be very sustainable as an organization as we're living into our mission. So is there any other questions? Anything else that comes to mind?
I just have one last thing I want to say something. So as a board member, it's a volunteer position, and it's a lot of energy, it's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of passion involved. And I just recently went back on the board, and previous to that I was on the board for a little over 4 years. It's supposed to be a 3-year term. And those were probably the most tumultuous years that we've had. But I had the pleasure of serving with some great people, including our very own Barry. Barry has recently, he's going to be stepping off this month, and I'm taking over as the treasurer. But I get a little choked up because Barry and I have known each other for a while, and he would come in to drop the kids off, or he would come in and pick the bus up, and I'd always give him a hard time because he bicycles. And so I would always say to Barry, look at those legs, those are some nice legs. And he would just get all red, and then finally he was just like, stop it. But over the years, he and I have volunteered on many things, and he has supported me in my, him and Deb have supported me in my Thanksgiving outreach when I make the hot meals. And he and I worked together during those 4 years, and it wasn't just one meeting a month, it was 2 meetings a week. And it was a very difficult time. And so I just want to say from me, I want to thank you. You are an amazing person, and not only in this, but in your personal life, I know. And so I'm glad to have you as a friend. And I just want to say thank you for your service.
Yes, I think that brings up an important fact, is that for us all to realize that we all have something to bring, right? And sometimes we don't think our contribution can be or is very much, but if we all think of, hey, what can I do? What little thing, no matter how little thing is, there's no too little of a thing. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and that analogy in Scripture of the body of Christ, and so not saying that one part of the body is less than the other, like that's something that is part of the Scriptures there, and down to like, you know, even like the toes. We might not think about our toes too much, but if any of you has ever stubbed or hurt one of your toes, you know how rough that is. Sort of, my wife just had toe surgery recently, and it has had a brutal effect on her. And so yeah, so every part of the body is so important. And so don't remotely think that.
And that thought, when it's presented as the different members, each one having their place, big or small, or seemingly visible or not visible, honored or not honored.
Yeah.
It talks about the body growing by what every joint supplies.
Yeah.
And I think that's always been an important thing for us to realize too, is that it's not by what the member supplies. The joint is the connection between members.
Yeah.
It in itself, a joint is not a member, so much as it is the connection between members. And I think that's an important thing for us to realize too, that our church will grow through the connection that we develop among each other, with each other, where someone says, hey, what about this? Or hey, I'm here, I can do this. And then we work together to make that happen.
On that note, I wanted to bring up that we're in the middle of revamping our website. Our very own Jeff is doing that. And so there's some new things that are going to be on there. We, in prior years, we had our financial statements on there, and through moving and all of that, it just kind of fell by the wayside. That's it, exactly. So we will be having every month an updated financial statement on there, so you'll be able to see where that's going. And just a reminder, so the board meetings are the second Tuesday of every month. Right now, that's what they are. It is open to you to come to let us know if you want to be a part of that for the first 15 minutes. And if you have questions for the board or anything like that. And I encourage that.
Questions or ideas.
Yeah, or ideas, definitely, yeah. I encourage that because I want you to be involved so that, so you're comfortable with knowing where we're going and what we're doing, and so that we're on a path that you see that you're aligned with. I think is just, for me, is really important. So I'm really excited about the website because that's a way to get the information out there. And Jeff is just like, man, he's amazing. So yeah, that's all I have.
All right. Are there any other questions? If not, anything online? No, any comments there? Okay, awesome. Well, I'm going to pray, and if there, I imagine, some of us don't feel comfortable talking in front of a group, but maybe one-on-one. If there's some of you who maybe have a question or anything, but just didn't feel like talking about it in front of everyone, feel free to still approach me on it after, and I'd love to talk to you. So let me pray, and then we'll head on. God, thank you so much for the community of Mission Gathering. I thank you so much for just the niche that we're able to fill here in East County, that we get to be this progressive expression of the Christian faith. And God, I pray that just coming out of this conversation, that we would feel encouraged, that we would feel hopeful, that we would feel optimistic about the future of Mission Gathering. And I pray, God, that anyone who needs a community like Mission Gathering would find us, that this place would continue to just become more and more vibrant, and that as individuals and as a community, that your Spirit would move in us to cause us to be more loving, to be more inclusive, to more fully embody this radical grace that Jesus taught and lived, that we are still catching up to. We pray all these things in your holy name. Amen. All right, guys, thank you so much. And like I said, if you still wanted to talk a little more but didn't feel comfortable in front of everyone, feel free to talk to me.
Good meeting.